welcome everyone to this session on what it means to thrive as a leader of color. I will explain more about how this whole session is going to work, but just to help all of us arrive and really get here and present, I'm going to turn the reins over to Zee Clark, who I'll introduce in full in just a minute, but she's an expert in leading in many things, but in guiding breathwork and mindfulness practices. And I thought that'd be a great way just to help us all arrive here. So Zee, I'll just turn it over to you.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. I invite you to sit up straight. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable or have a soft downward gaze. Exhale all of your air out. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last time. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And relax and allow the breath to be natural. Focus your attention on your forehead and allow your forehead to just relax. Focus your attention on your eyebrows, allowing your eyebrows to just relax. Focus your attention on your eyelids, allowing your eyelids to be heavy as you relax. Focus your attention on your nose, feeling the air coming in through the nostrils and out through the nostrils. Focus your attention on your jaw, allowing your jaw to just relax. Focusing your attention on your neck, allowing your neck to just relax. Focus your attention on your shoulders, allowing your full shoulders to fall away from your ears. Focus your attention on your arms, allowing your arms to just relax. Focus your attention on your hands, allowing your hands to just relax. Focus your attention on your legs, on your thighs, allowing your thighs to relax. Focus your attention on your knees, allowing your knees to just relax. Focus your attention on your lower legs, on your calves, your shins, relaxed. Focus your attention on your ankles, allowing your ankles to just relax. Focus your attention on your feet, the tops of your feet, the bottoms of your feet, relaxed. Focus your attention on your toes, your big toes, second toes, third toes, fourth toes, pinky toes, allowing all of your toes to be relaxed. On your next inhalation, feel the air come from the tips of your toes, up your feet, up your legs, up your arms, up your neck, all the way to the top of your head. And then exhale through the mouth. Ha! And when you're ready, flutter your eyes open and welcome back.
I needed that. Thank you so much. We could spend the whole webinar you just doing that for like 20 to 30 minutes, and that would be really awesome. So again, I'll welcome everyone to this webinar about what it means to thrive as a leader of color. My name is Renee Moorefield, and I'm CEO of Works. And for the last 25 years, the focus of our company, the real mission has been to bring the science and cultural insights about human thriving to life within leadership, within teams, within organizations. So we're really interested in the kind of leadership that is healthier, more inclusive, more effective around the world. So that's what we do. This webinar series, I'll tell you, the spirit behind it is really about deeper understanding, deeper connection, deeper sense of human dignity and love. And that's it's from a place of generosity that we offer this webinar, and really are so excited to welcome these panelists and all of you in it. So what's going to happen for the next few minutes is I will introduce each one of our panelists. We've got three really esteemed leaders. I'll introduce them more formally, and then I'll ask them a question. What does it mean to thrive to you personally? And give them time to answer that question. Then I'll introduce the next one. After we finish with all three, then we have a whole nother, few questions for about 20 minutes for them to answer. We're going to open it up to Q&A then. So there's going to be a good 20 minutes for Q&A. I've asked Kate to help us stay on time and to be pretty strict about that, because I've gone to many webinars where there's no time for Q&A, and we want to make sure that you get your questions answered. If for some reason your questions don't get answered in this session, we will follow up with you however we can with some responses. So is everyone ready to rock and roll for this webinar? So I want to start with introducing you to Dr. Carol Labore. And the reason I want to start with you, Carol, is because our conversations with you last year really sparked this series on what it means to thrive as a leader of color. Our hope is that this is the first of a number of conversations we have about this. So thank you so much for being here. And I know you can see that Dr. Carol is in her car. She's been having some traffic woes, so she's pulled over to the side of the road just to make sure she could be a part of this and be fully present. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Carol. So here's her bio, and it's incredible. Dr. Carol Labore is the advisor on mental health, a presidential appointment in Sierra Leone, founder of Her Wellness, a gender-centered consultancy, vice chair of Africa's CDC's high-level advisory committee on non-communicable diseases and mental health, and a board member of African Association of Threat Assessment Professionals. Dr. Carol has over 3 decades of expertise in gender-focused education, mental health, and psychosocial support. As a survivor of gender-based violence herself and a resilience coach, she pioneers multi-sectoral wellness programs and conducts impactful research at the intersection of gender, mental health, and trauma. Dr. Carol uses trauma-informed pedagogy to design scalable interventions that support the mental well-being of vulnerable populations, inclusive of women and girls, persons living with HIV, and survivors of gender-based violence. Her global reach includes women and girls from countries including, but not limited to, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Haiti, Ghana, Turkey, Syria, China, Jamaica, Mexico, Iraq, Rwanda, Kenya, South Africa, England, and the United States. So thank you so much again for all the tremendous work you do in this world, Dr. Carol. And I'd love to ask you the first question, and that is, what does it mean to thrive? What does it mean to thrive for you as a Black leader?
Thank you, Renee. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having this much needed conversation. What it means for me to thrive as a Black leader and a Black woman is really to prioritize my mental well-being. There's a lot of situations that occur on a daily basis. I'm currently based in Sierra Leone, West Africa. And so just having to prioritize my work-life balance, being a mom to my kids, and then also to supporting the work that I do here across multi-sectoral ministries, departments, and agencies is tough. But in order for me to thrive and really focus on my well-being is to practice time management, pick my battles, and then also say no. I say no a lot if my plate is full. And those are just some of the ways that I practice thriving and what it means to me. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you. And we're going to start in after I introduce the rest of the panel members. We're going to start in with some questions, and I've got some specifically for you. So stay tuned on that. So I want to introduce second of our panelists is Aaronde Creighton. Aaronde Creighton is the Chief Diversity Officer of the Leadership Circle. As Chief Diversity Officer, he creates the company's strategic approach to justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And he supports the Leadership Circle's community of practitioners in this work. As Chief Diversity Officer, he is also a member of the Leadership Circle's leadership team, helping to guide the global organization, and he serves clients directly as a consultant, an executive coach, and a facilitator. Aaronde holds a Master of Science in Positive Organization Development and Change. He is a professional certified coach and a graduate of the Georgetown University's Executive Certificate in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Personally, Aaronde makes his home in Atlanta, Georgia, with his wife and daughters. We heard stories about his daughters prepping for this webinar, and they sound like rock stars. He is a founding member and board chair of Coaching for Everyone, an organization focused on providing coaching services and training to Black, Indigenous, and people of color professionals. Aaronde, thank you so much. You and I had a chance to meet probably a little over a year ago now, and I have just admired you from the beginning of that relationship. And I really appreciate that you are willing to be on this panel.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Renee, and the feeling's mutual.
I wonder, what does it mean for you to thrive? What does thriving mean to you?
So for me, when I think of thriving, there's three key words that come to mind for me: authenticity, boundaries, and joy. And so just to touch on each of those, when I talk about authenticity, we've all heard, especially in the past 3 to 5 years, bring your authentic self to work. Now, for me personally, I find that to be disingenuous in a lot of environments. And so when I talk about authenticity, what I mean by that is, how can I bring the true version of me to an environment where my personhood can also be respected, right? Many times we want people to bring their authentic self as long as it fits within our boundaries of whatever those boundaries are, right? So that would be the first thing. The second thing, when I say boundaries, it's just the simplicity that as a Black man, I have emotions, I have feelings, there are things that I go through. And so how can I show up with the boundaries that when I'm upset about something, my emotions don't get placed on the second tier because of the discomfort that it may cause for other colleagues in the workplace. If I don't want to go to dinner, I shouldn't have to go to dinner, right? So how can I have the boundaries where I can be the professional that I desire to be and also maintain my own personhood? And then the last part, when I talk about joy, is there's so many things, and I'm sure that Dr. Labor and Zee will talk about it as well. But there's so many ways that as Black people, we're not able to lean into our own joy and recognize that. There's a gentleman here in Atlanta, Carlton Mackey, who started an organization called Black Men Smile. And I love one of his themes is Black joy is revolutionary. And when Carlton wrote that, and I'm just going to read it directly off his website because I don't want to misname it. He says, Black joy is revolutionary because of all that it must resist and the ways it must persist in order to simply exist. Mm. So when we can show up that way in our authenticity with boundaries and with joy, to me, that's what thriving is in the workplace.
That's beautiful, beautiful. And thank you for that quote. That is, yeah, really appreciate that. I've got some questions for you, Aaronde, later about a conversation we had about resilience and the meaning of resilience.
Absolutely.
It's overused. So hold that thought, please. So I want to introduce our third panel member, and this is Zee Clark. You've already experienced her magic, but I want to now share more her formal bio. Zee and I have just gotten to know each other, so we're really just getting to meet each other. And I want to thank Aris Erkul, who's on this call, who introduced us. Aris really made the connection for us, and that just really appreciated Aris. So Zee Clark. Zee Clark is a breathwork and resilience expert and the author of the groundbreaking book, Black People Breathe. Aaronde, that's your cue. Awesome. It's a beautiful book. Mine is arriving today, so I'm super excited about it. Trained in India, Zee is a Harvard MBA that went from leading teams at Fortune 500 companies to teaching powerful tools to improve our mental health and well-being in the workplace. Her Breathwork at Work program helps companies support their entire workforce in reducing stress, boosting productivity, and prioritizing self-care. Her Black at Work program focuses on helping people of color manage the chronic stress and professional development challenges resulting from microaggressions and systemic racism. Companies like Google, Visa, and AMC Networks are supporting the well-being of their teams with these programs. Zee has been featured in many publications, including Fortune, Forbes, Oprah Daily, ABC, CNBC, Ebony, Essence, and Fast Company. And I've got some information about Zee that you can follow her, but we'll be following up this webinar with contact information from all three of these panelists so that you can reach out to them. So Zee, I wonder for you, what does it mean to thrive personally and professionally?
I want to bring a term into this discussion, which is flow state. So, flow state is the optimal state of consciousness where you feel your best and you can perform at your best. And that performance isn't just at work. We all know that when we feel amazing, we are our best selves. And that reflects at work in our performance, but also how we treat our partners, our children, and everyone that we interact with. And so for me, as a Black woman that was in corporate America for a long time, I heard a question recently that really resonated, and it is this: who are you uninterrupted? Who are you uninterrupted? And think about all the things that interrupted you in the first place, whether that is microaggressions, racism, that thing that your mother said to you when you were a child, that thing that your boss said to you, your fifth grade teacher, all of the things. And so for me, how can you get to flow state? And that's what I specialize in. And mindfulness and breathwork can help, particularly on the mindfulness front, is just paying attention to how am I feeling right now? How am I doing? Aaronde talked about emotions, right? Like checking in, what am I feeling right now? And then for me, because I specialize in breathwork, though there are many ways to get to flow state, there is a specific breathing practice that you can do based on how you're feeling. Because the thing is, we can't control what other people say. We can't control what other people do, but what we can control is how we feel inside. And that's where these powerful tools can help.
Thank you, Zee, and I know we're going to be hearing more about that as well. I'm going to now ask you as three panelists some questions, but I would love as an audience this question: what does it mean for you to thrive? If you would put a couple of comments in the chat, like what does it mean for you to thrive personally and professionally? We all come from very different walks of life. What does it mean to thrive for you? And just put a couple of comments there, and that would be great. So while that's happening, I want to acknowledge that the three of you, our panelists, come from very different backgrounds, countries worked, sectors that you're working in, so academia, corporate, government. So you come from such a wide variety that you can give us a broad perspective of what are the challenges and stresses that you're experiencing or that you're seeing as a Black leader. And by the way, I know also that you're having your own experience. Aaronde, when we were prepping for this call, you had said, I don't know that I can speak for everybody. So we all have such an individual human experience, but it would be great to know what is your experience as a Black leader of the challenges and the stresses that you face. And who would like to start?
I can start if you like.
Great, Carol. Thank you.
I think so. My challenges as a Black leader and as a Black woman, if you would, it comes from my counterparts immediately because they expect you to behave a certain way, expect you to talk a certain way. And especially with me living in Sierra Leone, I always get, are you Black? Are you African? Are you American? Where's your accent from? And so it comes right from my counterparts. And then living and thriving in a low resource setting, that's one of the challenges as well, because it's really like crabs in a barrel trying to do this work, trying to integrate mental health into multi-sectoral spaces, trying to just get programs off the ground. There's like one pot of funds that everyone's scrambling for. So that leads to the challenges of not enough resources, leads to the challenge of a lot of conflict, unspoken conflict in the office, a lot of exclusion. Those are some of the challenges that I face, especially being perceived as an outsider. Even though I am Sierra Leonean, I was born in Sierra Leone, but lived overseas for a long time before I came back. And so it's like, no, she's not one of us. You know, she's not going to stick around. She's only here, you know, to get some more experience and she'll leave, and not knowing that I'm very vested and it was a conscious choice to move back home. So those are just some of the challenges that I deal with right from my counterparts without even getting to the higher level. I
And
would say that here in Sierra Leone, there's a lot of leeway. Zee mentioned performance. And so we don't have like performance. Our performance isn't measured. It's really design the program, implement the program. So that pressure isn't there, but the challenge is to actually get the funds and to implement the program is there. Thank you.
yeah, and Dr. Carol, you, when we were prepping for this, you talked about that there were challenges and stresses both in Sierra Leone and also in your work in the USA, and that sometimes they were similar, but they were also quite different. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that, because I think that was really interesting that you had shared.
Hey, thanks, Renee. I think working in the United States was very challenging for me because Black women are seen as loud, too strong, too opinionated. Even the way that we dress is critiqued. I mean, I can stand next to a white woman and have on the same dress, and for some reason my dress will be too short, my heels are too high, my hair is too big. So those are some of the challenges working in America, in corporate America. And then for me as a neurodivergent adult is that pressure to perform, the
Mm.
pressure to perform, and people looking at us as just through one lens. And so we're not monolithic, everyone's different. All our cultures, our languages, our upbringing, our traumatic experiences, direct and indirect, they're all different. And so those are some of the things that make up who we are. And having to perform, if you would, in the workplace and hold my emotions, like Aaronde spoke to, some of the challenges faced in the United States, and then of course racism in the corporate world. Racism. I actually left the corporate world. I was sexually harassed by a white woman, a woman, and I became the black sheep because it was like, no, okay, she's nice. Maybe she didn't mean it, and I became the black sheep, and then eventually just decided to leave corporate America, if you would. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing more about that because I thought that was important, that there's some distinct stresses that you feel working in the US versus in other places.
Mhm.
Thank you for that. You mentioned Aaronde, so actually, Aaronde, I want to shift to you with this question.
Sure.
What unique challenges and stressors, and I don't, you believe Black leaders face, and I don't want to limit your answer at all, but I
Sure.
do actually want to hear at some point because I think it would be really interesting for the audience. When we talked to prep for this, you mentioned the depression and sense of isolation,
Mhm.
particularly of Black men. And I just think that would be wonderful to hear something
Sure.
about.
Sure. And I think that what's always valuable when you have a panel is that you're going to have three different perspectives because Carol, Z, and I have different life lived experiences. I bring that up specifically as we get into the conversation because I think one of the challenges that we have within an organizational structure is not understanding that Black people are not a monolith. And so, because of an experience that a coworker has with one other Black person, they tend to ascribe that to all other Black people, right? And this is the way I should interact with Black folks. And so that in and of itself becomes a stressor for many of us because we're different, right?
Mm.
Zee and Carol and I are different, just like every person on this call is different. When I talk about the mental health aspect of being in organizational environments, um, there is a stress, strain, and pressure that happens, especially for Black leaders, as we ascend into higher levels of organizations. And as we ascend, we don't always see people that look like us. And therefore, there's not necessarily a modeling or an understanding that can happen as I'm interacting with other leaders at my level. And the isolation that that can cause is extremely wearing on people. I'll use as an example, and I shared this earlier, some of you may be familiar with the unfortunate death of Dr. Bonnie Kendia Bailey at Lincoln University in Missouri, who went back to work at her alma mater as provost of student affairs. There is a white male president at Lincoln University in Missouri. And she consistently talked about the challenges that she was having, the help that she needed, the request to go out on FMLA. They terminated her less than a year in that position. And not long after that, Dr. Bailey had died by suicide.
Mm.
These are the challenges and the irony in that situation. And part of why it's so closely connected for me is the doctoral program that I'm in, Dr. Bailey was an alum of. And 7 years ago, she wrote her dissertation on the mental health of Black women as they ascend in higher education.
Mm.
The exact thing that she lost her life to. And so the mental health aspect, you mentioned about resilience, Renee. Here's the thing. When it comes to Black people, as I always say, we were built for this shit. We have endured so much over centuries of time that this is what we were built for. But because we were built for that, and because in many of our communities, it was, and I heard it from grandparents, from aunts and uncles, I understand, baby, you got to get up and keep moving. We don't always recognize when we're having our own mental health episodes because we're encouraged to just push through it and push beyond it. So when you hear things like resilience, yeah, I'm at a point in life in my 50s now where that becomes a little bit more triggering because I've been resilient all my damn life, right? And at some point, when does that trope of strong Black man, strong Black woman, do we look at that and say, time out? You don't have to do this by yourself. Help is out there.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm raising Black women, I have 2 adult daughters, I'm seeing the need to constantly impart that into them to say, girls, it's okay to take a breather. It's okay for mom and dad to help you out in this situation. It's okay for you to talk to somebody, right? Because those are the things that we think we have to do on our own in order to get to these higher levels in whatever organizations that we're part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Aaronde. I really appreciate you sharing more about that and that tragic story about your professor. Yeah, and the leader of the university.
Yeah.
Zee, I want to go to you and ask you the same question. And when we were prepping, you talked about, and I think you even put it in one of our chat conversations, strong Black woman. And it wasn't as a strong Black woman. It was kind of lending, I think, and this is what I want to check out with you, as Aaronde was saying, sort of this resilient, always pick yourself up, always be positive, always, 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 which to me sounds more like endurance, like enduring, rather than how the best of resilience, which is the ability to bounce back. This is about really enduring. So I wonder if you could share more about that, as well as anything you would like to share about the stresses and challenges you face as a Black leader.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Aaronde and Carol shared really resonates with me. Particularly this, you mentioned this strong Black woman, and Aaronde kind of touched on that we are just trained from a young age to just push through. I got it. I got it. My parents, first of all, mental health was not, I still, to this day, I cannot say those words with my parents because they're like, that doesn't exist. What are you talking about? It's like gaslighting. And, just a little bit about my background. I spent over 20 years in corporate America in financial services in New York City, in the tech industry in Silicon Valley. And so, Aaronde talked about that isolation. I have a chapter in my book, Black People Breathe, called The Only. And when you are the only, and you could be the only woman in the room as a tech, just in tech, I'd just be the only woman, right? But then you go to Black woman, and not only am I the only woman on my team, on the floor, in the building, and that comes with so much pressure. I have a chapter in my book and a workshop in my Black at Work program called To Code Switch or Not to Code Switch. Today, actually, there's a Fortune article. If y'all look at Fortune, there's like the CHRO blog thing, and there is an article about code switching and how that's like mental gymnastics all of the time. And so, what do we face when we are the only? Well, let's just talk about microaggressions. In my Black at Work program, I teach workshops on all the issues that we face in the workplace. And in my microaggressions workshop, I have a poll and I say, which of these have you experienced? Now imagine I'm at a large tech company whose products you use every single day, and 100% of the Black people on that workshop experience this: ignoring my comment and then someone else saying the exact same thing and getting applauded. And you're like, I just said that. And yet, what are you supposed to do, right? And that leads to imposter syndrome, which I also have a workshop and a chapter in my book called Countering Imposter Syndrome, because we experience self-doubt. If people are questioning our competence, people have said to me multiple times, are you the new diversity hire? I'm like, I have 2 degrees from Harvard, and yet, and that's not the job that I applied for. So what happens when I experience those things? Because I am not alone. That's why I wrote this book. Well, the School of Public Health at Harvard University talks about how the higher rates of high blood pressure in African Americans is a direct result of discrimination and racism. It causes chronic stress. The symptoms of chronic stress are high blood pressure. Black people have higher rates of high blood pressure. Diabetes. Did you know that those 2 things are connected? Who has higher rates of high blood pressure? Black people. Weakened immune system. We actually were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Aaronde talked about anxiety and depression. And, I just want to share with you that a study came out recently that showed that Black women go undiagnosed of depression because we have different symptoms. And so while, other folks of different identities have the privilege of being sad and showing their sadness, we do not. And so our symptoms are sleep disturbances, self-criticism, irritability, and lower libido. We are suffering. We don't even know that that's wrong with us. And research shows that racism causes accelerated aging. Dr. Martin Luther King was 39 when he passed, but he had a heart of a 60-year-old, it showed, in the autopsy. And another study showed that Black women are aging at a significantly faster rate than white women. And so all of this is what we're experiencing, and then we're at work, and we got to perform. And, Dr. Carol said that we need to, there's pressure to perform is stressful. Well, I have a workshop called Managing the Need to Outperform. Why? Because any Black person knows that you grew up, you knew that you needed to work twice as hard just to get half as far. Every Black person is nodding right now, And so because of that, you're pushing yourself, and you know what happens? Burnout. And that's what happened to me. And then we're trying to rise up in the ranks, but we can't because of the not glass, but concrete ceiling. That's what it looks like for us because we don't have sponsors and mentors. Even though research shows that a Black manager, if you have a sponsor, you have have a 65% higher chance of getting promoted. 65%. But guess what? We don't get sponsors. Nobody taps us on the shoulders and says, hey, I have this opportunity for you. And we don't get actionable feedback in the workplace. A study shows that we are 9 times less likely to get actionable feedback at work. I'm talking about specific examples. I'm talking about actions that you can take to improve. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. You're not ready for a promotion. Why? No answer. So those are just, look, corporate, Black in corporate, it's real, it's serious. People commit suicide, and it's not just in, in corporate, it's it's in academia, it is everywhere. I'm going to stop talking.
Thank you. I feel like I need another breath practice. Like I could literally feel my whoa. But yeah, it is stressful. I mean, what everything you're talking about is such a level of burden, such a level of burden. You already started to hint, Zee, as to some possible shifts that could make things better and I'm gonna talk about, or I'm gonna ask about in the work environment specifically. We're not talking about in communities and neighborhoods and all that in the world. We really are talking about at work right now. But I'm wondering, and would you talk about a little more, Zee, about or call out any of those shifts that you feel like these are some shifts that we've either thought about and yet they're not being implemented well, or they haven't even been thought about. Like we are missing the mark and we need to be making these kinds of shifts if we're going to create, and this is to me the definition of leadership, by the way, leaders steward the environments where all people can thrive. That's the definition of good leadership. So what would those shifts be to steward the environment for Black people to thrive at work?
All right. Well, I got some ideas. Not that everything is the silver bullet. Nothing is the silver
Sure,
bullet, right? So
sure.
just a few thoughts. Aaronde said this, we are not a monolith, right? We are not all the same. And so mental health resources need to be tailored to our specific needs, right? And so, what do I mean by that? I mean, first of all, even just like, can I find a Black therapist? Right? Like, and I know that there's a pipeline issue and people, but let's just start there. But more than that, in companies offering training that's specific to the issues that we are facing. That's why my Black at Work program exists, because other people aren't experiencing Black fatigue. I have a workshop on that. Other people aren't experiencing, microaggression. Well, people of different identities are, right? Like people, marginalized identities. And so offering resources and training that is around the specific needs that we have around mental health. The other thing, and anybody in corporate is going to, and most white people in corporate in leadership roles are just going to tell me this is never going to happen, and thank you for the pipe dream. But I believe in tying leadership compensation to the employee satisfaction rates. They do surveys every year. Guess who has the lowest rates consistently and nobody cares? Black people. And so what if, because how do you get people to change? Money, y'all. Okay. So tie it to the money and action happens. Tie, your bonus, a portion of its company, it's all, there's a percentage of what goes into bonuses, right? How the company is doing, how your team is doing, what's the economy like. But what if it was tied to employee satisfaction rates? Then you would do better. And then the last thing, which is hard to be like tactical, like how is creating a psychologically safe space. I mean, make it okay for me to be able to express an opinion that might be different than yours. And so I think that there is training that can happen to make that happen. But, that one feels a little bit more like softer in terms of like, but how do you do it? So those are some thoughts.
I really appreciate that. And to your thought on it's pipe dream that companies are going to tie executive compensation with employee satisfaction, I will say, and I won't say the company yet because I want to make sure they do it, but we have just worked with a company and we added to their diversity and inclusion index that they've created inside a whole section on thriving and well-being. And our recommendation is you tie this to executive compensation, because if you don't, then that's part of the flywheel that makes this really work. So thank you, Zee. Aaronde,
Renee, can I just make a comment about just to add on to everything that plus one to everything Z said? 2 points that I'll make from an organizational perspective that I think people need to keep in mind. Whether you're talking about specifically Black leaders, other ethnic groups, neurodiverse, LGBTQIA plus, whatever the case is, I think most organizations hire for difference but manage to sameness.
Mm,
So we hire for someone who looks different, acts different, is different from us. But once they come into the organization, we manage them like everybody else in the organization because that's what we really want, right? That's dangerous. Years ago, Dr. Aaron Reeves did a study and talked about how when we are forced to interact with someone who's different from us, it actually creates new synapses in our brain. It actually makes us smarter because I've got to really pull from experience, everything else to understand what might be different and what Jay and I might have in common, right? If all I'm doing is interacting with the same people over and over, on some levels, I'm getting dumber. It doesn't take a whole lot for me to continually interact with the exact same type of people. So that would be the first point that I would say. From a practical part to what Z talked about, yes, on the mental health resources and all of that. But I'll give you a very real example that happens in organizations where they'll say, no, I do see, Demetria, that you've got all this potential and we really want to invest in you. So we're going to give you coaching and we're going to let you select your coach. And she gets a slate of all white female coaches. Demetria is sitting there going, this is an investment for me? Because there's things that she's experiencing as a Black woman that, one, she may not even be comfortable talking to a white female coach about. And two, are you really going to be able to help me in that space? Now, as a coach, I know people are already saying, but we can coach everyone. Yes, and bullshit sometimes. Okay. Because let's be real, there are experiences that I am able to talk to my Black male coach, my Black male therapist about that I don't have to spend 7 sessions explaining and getting the whole prequel up to what this happened. Because they've been there, done that. So when we're offering some of these programming and services, let's keep that in mind and make sure that we have a slate of people who look like them. Whoa, wait a minute. Now I feel a little bit more connected because maybe Rosario has an experience that maybe she and I will be able to connect and relate. So I just want to make that practical within organizations of something that happens that we think that we're elevating somebody. And in their mind, they're like, actually, this is adding more pressure and anxiety to the situation I'm already in.
that is great. Really
And
appreciate
if I could,
Yeah, hold on for just one second, Dr. Carroll. Aaronde, I really appreciate you drawing that out, especially about coaching, because I can see that also being the situation with mentoring or with any other types of support that we're trying to provide. And then on your first point about seeking difference, it's fascinating to me, and you are certified in our assessment system, so you know the tool. When we measure seeking difference, so that's one of our categories. We find that when people lean into seeking difference, their scores for thriving are higher. They will score higher thriving scores. So not only more effective, as you mentioned, but greater fulfillment, well-being, happiness, satisfaction when they lean into that. So it's interesting that we have not quite made those connections yet in organizations. Thank you. So Dr. Carroll, what do you want to add? And then we're going to have some questions. I can feel Kate saying, Renee, there's questions in the chat.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of that one size fits all approach doesn't work. And these policies, strategies, tools, they need to be culturally appropriate because not every Black person, again, comes from the same culture or background. And then even when you have coaches in a workplace, do they understand our struggles? Do they understand our historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences that we've all gone through, and how we may react to certain things, how we manage our emotions, even how we laugh and how we talk, and whether or not we're animated. It's very important that individuals understand that. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Just you augmenting what Aaronde was saying about that. So why don't we shift to some questions? I haven't, because I've been so focused on these panelists, I have not even had a chance to look at the chat. So Kate, I'm going to rely on you to pick out a question or two. I know we've got about 13 more minutes. And
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be able to do that.
Perfect. Demetria, you put some questions in the chat, and I wonder if you wanted to maybe which one you want to maybe start with and offer it over to you to kind of ask your question of the panelists.
Okay, thank you so much. This panel, there, I give you your flowers now in terms of what you've shared and imparted in me specifically. I would imagine everyone else on the call has been blessed, but for me specifically, this has been a much needed uh, time for me to be able to hear your voices and to be able to experience your wisdom and to hear from you. So thank you for that gift. One of the questions that I had is if you could discuss the need for and how to intentionally create a team as opposed to trying to do it all by ourselves.
I would jump in there and say, oftentimes, the higher you go in an organization, a lot of times you're actually managing a team or leading a team and having to have your colleague leadership, your colleague leaders as a team that it doesn't actually always happen. And so the higher you go, you're working in silos because you're collaborating at a higher level with your colleagues, but then you're actually managing a team, leading a project. And so you have a lot of that pressure on you that takes its toll psychologically and physically as well.
And Demetria, one thing that just to clarify, when you say team, are you talking about your own personal support team, that team at your workplace environment, or both and?
Yeah, both. Thank you for that question. Yeah, so both and right. So when you think about at work or in the corporate space, you need a team, and I believe it was Zee who brought up, right? You need someone who's going to be there to say, hey, here's this opportunity, or hey, I think maybe you should be in this circle or join this group. But then personally, you obviously need a team because you live in the real world and you're
Yeah.
Black in the real world, right? So
Yeah.
what does it look like? Yeah.
So I'll address the kind of the personal team side, and I don't know if Zee wants to chime in on the other one, or Carol wants to add. I think when it comes to your personal team, for me, it's the attitude of it takes a village, right? So who are the people that I need around me to support me in some other areas, and that I can also support, right? So, I openly and freely say, my 3 week schedule is 1 week off, second week is my coach, my third week is my therapist, and then we rinse and repeat. And so those are the individuals that I have relationships with. And there are plenty of resources out there. I think there's a Black Therapist Rock website where you can find Black therapists if that's what you need to look for. Many times, many coaching organizations, whether it's local chapters, can help you identify coaches of color as well. And so for me, it was literally trying to find people that I knew would both challenge me, but also understand. So, using my therapist as an example, he's very, very well steeped in the connection of many of our historical traumas to some of the things that we deal with, right? And so that was something that was important for me. And then it's just, those people that you connect with sometimes at a conference or at a meeting that might not be in your field, but are great people for you to bounce ideas off of. Those are people that I include. And then, I always have at least one colleague that is there, right? And they're your ride or die. And through experience, right? And that person may be Black, they might not be. Okay. And that's okay. All right. So that's just some of the ways that I look at it for my own personal, network and support team.
I'll add a little bit to that. I recently, I mean, not recently, but in the last several years have been exposed to this concept of a personal board of directors. And so thinking about, well, who should be on your personal board of directors? And I think a lot of what Aaronde shared in terms of they don't need to be of your same ethnicity. They don't, like think about what aspects of yourself need nourishment and guidance, and then think about who could be there. But I will say in the context of corporate America, that is really important to have people on your side in the organization, especially those that are more senior than you. So in my workshops, particularly around helping folks rise up in the ranks and how do you find mentors and sponsors, they're not going to tap us on the shoulder. And so if we know that already, well, then we need to navigate accordingly. And so what I advise people to do is identify who do you think could help you? Who do you think would be good based on their connections and influence in the organization, but also you can get on you can tell people's vibrations, like whether they're going to be down or not. And so thinking about that, so then you identify the people, you got maybe 3 or 5 of them, because they're not all going to say yes, right? You probably out of 5, you might get 1 maybe. And then you do a little research. This is a little I'd say it might sound a little shady, but guess what? It's helpful. You figure out what you have in common with that person, because most likely they're not going to be Black if you are Black. Just the stats in leadership, right? And so then you can look at, do they also have an autistic child? Do they run marathons? Do they volunteer in the community? Which not organizations, but at work, you have these clubs. What do they participate in? Join the clubs that they, don't lie. But if you also are into that, join it. Get to know them personally, ask them to coffee, and get people on your side, because it is those sorts of personal relationships that are going to be impactful. Then they're going to think of you and talk about you when you're not in the room.
Demetria, did those seemed like really practical ideas. Was that helpful?
It was very helpful. Thank you for taking the question.
Sure, terrific. I'm wondering, Kate, is there another question there?
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of merge a couple of different questions and comments that kind of came into the chat, and wonder if you all have kind of already spoken to this. So feel free to also say answered. But in my head, I think there might be an expansion of how you mentioned that Blacks are not a monolith, and also other marginalized communities. And so as a leader, if you have a team, what are some ways in which you try and understand them as individual people? And like you said, Aaronde, manage them not for sameness, but for differentiation, and manage them as who they are. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit more to that, maybe unpack it a little bit further, as there were some questions and comments in the chat about not only our conversation today, but about the others and how you lead different groups.
I think that people who fall into marginalized and protected class citizen groups probably have an easier time leading diverse groups, because you're accustomed to possibly being the only. And so therefore you find the different ways that you can build connections. So for instance, I live in the metro Atlanta area. I'm in the deep South. When it comes fall, it's football season down here. So just the simplicity of paying attention and seeing what team does somebody support. No, I hate UGA. I'm sorry, I'm not a UGA guy. Okay, I'm an Ohio State guy. Go Bucks. But those are some of the things how do we find commonalities? I think that when you fall into a number of dominant identity groups, you are walking into the room expecting everybody to look like you and interact like you. But when you walk into the room and you know that there's a very high chance that you're different, be that gender, ethnicity, physical ability, whatever the case is, you're trying to find, what is it that I might have in common with this person so that I can build a relationship, right? And so I think if that's the starting point when you're managing a team of people, you're trying to get them to see, like, here are the things that we have in common, not just the work that we do, but here's the other things that we have in common. So I think it's just simply asking the questions, right? As a male, if I walk into the room and there's only one woman, the default is I'm not necessarily thinking about that. It's sad to say, right? However, if all of a sudden I make an effort to call out and find out, hey, Renee, what do you like to do? And Renee tells me, you know what, I am a movie buff. We're in good shape, because I'm always at the movies, right? So finding those things that we have in common by simply asking the questions and taking the time to genuinely get to know the other person.
I want to add in a comment there, because I saw a question in the chat that is related to this one, which is, what is it like for you to manage people who are not Black? And so totally agree with what Aaronde said about building commonality and making sure that, You know, understand, well, who are these folks? Who, you know, who we are all human beings, regardless of what we look like. We are all humans. And so let's focus on that human connection. Now, I want to share that having been a Black manager to people that were of the majority, I have had experiences, and I have other friends that have too. And the term is career lynching. That is a term that has been
Mm.
introduced to me. And so what happens is that if you have white people reporting to you and they are not happy with whatever it is, then what happens is that they can go to HR and their voice is very heavy. So regardless of your leadership position, they might be very, very junior. I know multiple people that have gotten fired or have gotten investigations that happened that ruined their reputation, and that in the investigations found that it was all lies. And yet still it ruined their reputation and they had to leave the organization. And so I'll just share that we need to be very aware of all of the things. And I will say, and this is just advice to any Black manager, that you got to be real careful. You got to be extra soft and warm and coddling, because otherwise they might get you. I hate to be negative.
Wow.
That's why I
Yeah,
teach grooming practices.
yeah. And just to add, in my 30 years in professional life, I was written up 3 times. 3 times I was written up, all related to I did not feel safe.
Yes.
So when I talk about the emotions, when I talk about us
Mhm.
being able to be genuinely, authentically ourselves, in
Mhm.
one case, I had someone who was doing something towards members of my team. And when they came into our office space, I said, "You're not going to bring that in here. I'm tired of you abusing my people."
Mm.
And I was written up because this white male did not feel safe.
Yes. Perception. The perception, how when we express our emotions, how we're perceived as Black leaders in the workplace. And like Z said, you have to be careful, because someone can say, "Oh, she yelled." No, I didn't yell, but how this person perceives it, and then you're going to HR. So yes, it's very important that we know and are aware of the differences, the different people that are in these workplaces. Even I'll take myself as an example. I'm not very talkative in the workplace. I like to be alone. And then it's like, oh, she's standoffish. She thinks she's better. So we get these labels as Black leaders. We get labeled without people taking the time to understand why we do what we do. And so it's very important for that awareness to be there, that we're not all the same, and to understand the differences in individuals.
And
I
just a point to language, if I can. I love what Dr. Labor said, because you can be silent as a marginalized person and you're
Mhm.
standoffish.
Yeah.
You can be silent as a dominant person and they're a deep thinker.
Yes,
Yeah, I
exactly.
appreciate that. I'm going to close this only because we are at time, and I can feel myself wanting to continue for another hour. Like this is, I feel so appreciative of your honesty. I feel so appreciative of just the clarity that you have shared with us. And as someone who has identified as white, I feel humbled, and I feel like I've learned something new. And so I want to thank all three of you very much. Everyone who is part of this, thank you so much for being a part of this. We
you.
will follow up by sending out this recording. We'll send out the contact information to our panelists so that you can continue the conversations. I feel with the energy we had on this one that we should do another one. This was the first time, but now I'm saying we should do another one. So please give us feedback too. Please feel free to give us feedback on this. And thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone.